Hello, my name is Andrew Wendel. I'll be talking to you today about how my group uses white-collar crime to gauge regional perceptions of race and crime. So during the 1960s, the United States began to define young black men as the street criminal class. This was in big part a response to the civil rights movement that was happening at this time. This was reflected in mass media. In this case, we use print media, but you can also assume the same for television news. But it is assumed that the more unexpected something is, the more explanation and therefore individualization it requires. Therefore, our hypothesis previously has been that for an African American person, they would be individualized on average more than their white counterpart, because an African American person committing white-collar crime would not fit the society's stereotype that has been created for them. Our group has found this to be true on a national level, but today I'm going to be talking more to you about the regional patterns that make this up. And so if you pay attention to the left side of the screen here, what you can see is a map of the different areas of papers that we collect, separated into East, West, South, and Midwest papers. And then our individualization is always calculated on a per rate basis. So it's a per article, word count per article, so that everything is standardized. In a national individualization trend, what you can see here is that African Americans are being portrayed or individualized at a higher average and a broader standard deviation than the white population. Given our hypothesis and the relationship between individualization and the society stereotypes, this is fully expected. If you look at a cross-regional analysis of just African American data, looking at more regional papers rather than national papers, so the difference between things like the Pittsburgh Courier versus the New York Times. What you can see here is that West and Midwest are grouped together at a higher average, broader standard deviation than the East and Southern papers. This has been investigated slightly in the literature prior, predominantly by Entman and Lloyd, in the differences between Northern and Southern racial perceptions. The conclusion in both being that Northern racial perception tends to be more on a de facto basis, and Southern perception tends to be more of an ingrained law basis. This is obviously can be more mixed, but in generalities, this tends to be true. What I believe is happening here, and what I believe the cross-regional chart and graph is reflecting, is actually the internal migration patterns that we see in the mid-1900s. Due to the harsh climate in the South, as well as the oppression and discrimination that has unfortunately become so commonplace throughout time. And so what we're seeing here is that as these populations have moved, so have the trends. And so as during early 1900s and going into the 50s and 60s, Eastern and Southern cities were had a vast majority of the African American population in the United States. And as groups moved outwards, they predominantly filled areas in the West and Midwest due to increasing job markets and better political climates, or perceived political climates. And we have seen this trend reflected in a cross-regional analysis. I think with future studies and greater data, and looking at papers in a tighter, more regional fashion and smaller market papers, we're only going to see this trend expand. And I think it is critical in understanding how regional perceptions of crime and regional perceptions of race are fueling a national perception. Thank you.